The second generation Porsche Boxster not only brought a refresh of the Boxster model, but introduced a true hardtop coupe version named the Cayman. Porsche coded its entry-level sports car 987 with a .1 and .2 added to separate the pre- and post-facelift models. The new car was debuted in 2004 at the Paris Motor Show at the same time as the latest 911, coded 997. The Cayman followed a year later. For the 987 model, Porsche returned to the classic styling of oval-shaped headlights that had been a hallmark of the brand after departing from it in the previous generation. Although the engines would carry over from the previous 986 Boxster with mild adjustments initially until they were refreshed in 2007, we'll come onto the engines later in the guide, but for now, we'll point out that 4 separate displacements were available across the 987 platform, beginning with a 2.7 and 3.2 litre and increased to a 2.9 and 3.4 litre in later years. Both Boxster and Cayman were offered with a manual gearbox, which initially is a 5-speed in the regular Boxster and Cayman, and a 6-speed in the S models with Tiptronic 5-speed also offered. In some markets you may find the option of the 6-speed manual in both the base Boxster and Cayman. This would change in 2008 for the Boxster and in 2009 for the Cayman, when both regular and S models were then made available as a 6-speed manual as standard and a 7-speed PDK dual-clutch automatic as an option. Many enthusiasts seek out the manual models today, and fortunately there are plenty on the market, especially earlier models, as the 5-speed Tiptronic wasn't very appealing to sports car buyers. Later models still sold well with a manual gearbox, but the quick-shifting PDK was fast becoming a favourite among Porsche buyers, a trend that continues in later models. For those wanting the ultimate version of the 987 generation, the Cayman R arrived in 2009 with lighter weight and glowing reviews from automotive media. Today this is a collector favourite, especially among Porsche enthusiasts, as the Cayman R wasn't just a flamboyant model with a racier feel. The R badge had been used before by Porsche and originated back to 1967. There are many reasons why the 987 is becoming a favourite among car enthusiasts as it trickles towards 2 decades since its release. Hydraulic power steering remained until the end of the 987 generation, similar to the 911-997 generation. The next generation would switch to electronically power assisted steering, and even as those systems become finely tuned and engineered to give the same feel, there is still a strong desire by many classic car and modern classic car enthusiasts to get hydraulic power assisted steering vehicles. Not only that, but all the motors in the 987 are naturally aspirated across the generation, and many European buyers, along with those in other parts of the world with tighter roads, feel the 987's dimensions made it easier to place on tight winding roads than the larger successors. It should be noted that when looking at the used market, that 2006 was a particularly strong year for sales, with 2007 not far behind, and so if wanting the widest possible selection of choice, those 2 years are a good starting place. First in our guide we'll cover the common faults to look out for, but before that we'll recap some of the special editions and limited edition models in case you find yourself standing at a used car dealer wondering why the Boxster or Cayman you've gone to view looks a little unique compared to others. The Boxster Spider is easily spotted by its rear haunches. This was the lightest Porsche on sale at the time of its release in 2010, weighing 80 kilograms or 176 pounds less than the regular Boxster S model it was based on. It also gets a 10 brake horsepower increase over the S model. Earlier than this there was the RS60 Spider edition, limited to 1960 units worldwide to celebrate the 1960 win of the 12 Hours of Sebring, Florida. It was sold in GT Silver only and had Porsche Active Suspension Management or PASM and sports exhaust as standard that boosted power by 8 brake horsepower over the Boxster S. It should be noted that this model features a regular power roof unlike the later Boxster Spider, and is more of a special edition of the Boxster S than a reworking of the model. A limited edition and design edition 2 of the Boxster were also created in 2008. The model named limited edition is easy to spot by its brilliant orange paintwork, while the Porsche design edition 2 was Carrera white with matching white wheels. The Cayman was also sold as a design edition painted black, but with silver 911 turbo wheels at the time. 777 were produced worldwide. If you want to be spotted in a car park, the Cayman S Sport may be the one for you, painted either bright orange or signal green, both GT3 RS colours, or a subtle Carrera white. A total of 700 were made. A black edition Cayman S was limited to just 500 units, sold in 2011. Unlike the design edition that had black paint but silver, or machined wheel finish, the black edition features black wheels. Onto the common faults to look out for, and one looming issue is particularly discussed online for both the Boxster, Cayman and 911 Carrera at the time. This is the intermediate shaft bearing or IMS bearing, and any Porsche with an M96 or M97 motor fitted from 2004 to 2008 is susceptible to the failure. Due to the design of the engine, it is not possible for the engine oil under pressure to be channeled to lubricate the bearing. Failure due to a snapped centre bolt securing the IMS bearing, or oil contamination seeping past the seal, becoming trapped and causing the bearing to overheat are common ways the IMS fails. Failure leads to two outcomes: disassembly and rebuilding of the engine if it is damaged by debris from the failed bearing entering the motor and circulating around it, or catastrophic engine failure if the timing chains disengage. Some owners go their entire ownership without an issue, others aren't so fortunate. One thing that can be done is to shorten oil services to 6 months or 6,000 miles and drive a Boxster or Cayman of this era regularly and at higher engine speeds. This is believed to help keep the bearing lubricated. So gentle Sunday drivers may want to find their favourite rock album to encourage some foot to the floor spirited drives along a winding country lane rather than a sedate trip to the shops. We're sure your passenger will understand that you need to redline the motor while exiting a village. It's to keep your bearing lubricated after all. We usually pride ourselves on giving you tips to spot if a potential used purchase is likely to be troublesome. Unfortunately, when it comes to the IMS bearing, there isn't a clear telltale sign outside of oil leaks, but this is going to be hard to see unless you're able to get underneath the vehicle. If the IMS bearing failure concerns you enough to put you off buying a Porsche, the remedy is to look for a 2009 onwards model that doesn't have the IMS and remove any concerns of a failure. Next up is a leak in the rear main seal. Again, this may be hard to spot unless you can get underneath the vehicle. If the rear main seal is leaking, it has likely already leaked oil out onto the flywheel and clutch, which in most cases will result in damage, needing them to be replaced. If an owner mentions this has already been replaced, ask if it was done at a reputable specialist or Porsche dealer. The rear main seal needs to be pressed into place using a specialist Porsche tool. Tapping it into place has the potential to damage the seal or align it outside of the tight tolerance needed, meaning the leak is much more likely to return. If looking for an S model with a 3.4 litre engine, then start it up and look for any excessive smoke or irritating ticking noise. Either of these could be a sign of bore scoring. This will likely also cause high oil consumption and will require a specialist repair if damage has already been suffered. When on a drive, listen out for any rattles from the front suspension going over bumps or while cornering. The stabiliser bar has been known to loosen the nuts holding it in place and will cause a rattle. If the Boxster or Cayman is advertised without a working key fob, it has likely become unsynchronised due to repeated attempts to unlock or lock the vehicle while out of range. Have a good look at the back of a Boxster or Cayman to make sure the exhaust is pointing out straight towards you. If it is pointing down at all, then the exhaust hanger has failed and will need replacing. Look around the side air intakes of any potential purchase for any stone chips to the paintwork. Although this may not be a big deal cosmetically and can be repaired, the bigger danger is that some of the loose stones or small rocks have entered the intake and damaged the radiator. Some owners fit fine mesh over the grills if they live in an area where this has an increased risk of happening. Now onto the engines, and we'll start with the smallest. As for those looking to buy a Boxster or Cayman as a second car, these are potentially lower specification and cheaper to buy on the used market, making them a potentially great fun car while the sun is shining and all seems right with the world. The 2.7 litre 6-cylinder engine creates 237 brake horsepower in 2005 and 2006 production models and 242 brake horsepower in 2007 onwards, until it is replaced with the 2.9 litre. Fuel economy is officially quoted at an average of 30.4 miles per gallon or 9.29 litres per 100 kilometres. These engines are affected by the IMS bearing issue we mentioned earlier, however the later 2.9 litre is not. They are also affected by the failure of the rear main seal, although the most common complaints we found was an oil leak that was due to a failure of a gasket or seal elsewhere in the engine. When looking at a used example, take along a bright inspection light similar to the one that we always use and link in the comments of all our videos, and don't be afraid to poke and prod and look around the engine as best you can. Check around the front grills to make sure that a previous owner has kept them clean. The radiators for the coolant and air conditioning are located behind, and if left they can have a build-up of road debris, leaves and dirt that impedes the cooling ability of the radiators. Finally, as best you can, try to have a look at the exhaust manifolds. These cars are getting older and specialists are reporting that they are beginning to see more of these cars enter workshops with cracks in the exhaust manifolds, usually requiring a fairly costly replacement. Moving on to the 2.9 litre that followed in the base Cayman and Boxster, in most markets you'll get 252 brake horsepower in the Boxster and 261 brake horsepower in the Cayman. An average of 31 miles per gallon or 9.11 litres per 100 kilometres means there won't be much difference between the fuel costs, although the 2.9 litre will likely give better fuel economy when cruising if equipped with a manual thanks to those 6 gears as opposed to the standard 5. These motors don't suffer from the Ims bearing issue and are generally considered very reliable, with bore scoring the most reported complaint, although this appears to generally affect very early ones, and even then it is not particularly common. Smoke on startup is something to look out for, although again we found several stories online of owners having their 2.9 litre smoke on startup for over 5 years of ownership without using a drop of oil and without any major issues. Next up is the S models, and the Boxster starts with a 3.2 litre 6-cylinder until 2007, when it is replaced by a 3.4 litre. The Cayman comes with a 3.4 litre from launch in 2006. Expect fuel economy of 26.8 miles per gallon on both motors, or 10.54 litres per 100 kilometres. Again, bore scoring and Ims bearing failure seem to be the most common complaints on these engines, although we should stress we mean the most common complaints in a small number of overall issues and not a common problem. But bore scoring on the 3.2 is fairly rare. It is worth noting that many early tests comparing the newer 2.9 litre Boxster to the older 3.2 litre Boxster S resulted in many believing the 2.9 is quicker, and so if you've set your sights on an early Boxster S but see a 2.9 facelifted base Boxster for similar money, it may be worth having a test drive to compare. Once again, the facelift in 2009 brings an update to the engines fitted to both the Boxster and the Cayman S, upgrading power in the S models to 306 brake horsepower in the Boxster and 315 brake horsepower in the Cayman. These tend to average similar fuel economy, but are no longer affected by the Ims bearing issue. We did find some reports of bore scoring in colder climates, but it didn't seem common enough to mark as an issue, as previous owners' maintenance may have been a factor. High pressure fuel pumps failing or beginning to fail, and warning owners with reduced power were also noted in our research. As ever with Porsche, the vehicles tend to be built well, and generally owners report positive ownership experiences, but if we've missed any common issues, then please add them in the comments below to help others in their search for a Boxster or Cayman. For our picks, we would look for a well cared for 3.2 Boxster S model on the lower budget, or with a higher budget we'd opt for a late Cayman S equipped with a manual gearbox. We also have a guide for the Mazda MX-5 if you prefer the thrills of the top-down motoring without the need for higher horsepower. A Porsche badge means higher quality and more premium feel, but it is still a Porsche, and so remember to adjust expectations of maintenance costs accordingly. If you find the guide useful and it helps you buy a car, you can always leave us a super thanks to help out the channel, but either way, all the best with your car search.